The advertisements called it a miracle. From the barren, dust-choked plains, far from the decaying old cities, the city of tomorrow rose not like a town, but like a gleaming, sterile monument to hope. Its promise was a siren's song, luxurious homes for a pittance, immaculate parks, schools that promised brilliance, and a cathedral of glass and steel they called a hospital, offering health and education for free. It was a vision of impossible perfection, and a desperate world flocked to it, a river of hopeful souls pouring into a gilded cage they were too eager to enter. The first weeks were a beautiful, sun-drenched lie. The streets, paved in silent, light-absorbing material, were illuminated at night by lamps that cast no shadows, only a uniform, sterile glow. The air hummed with the laughter of children and the excited chatter of families unpacking their futures. The hospital's facade, a vast prism of spotless glass, reflected the sun, looking less like a building and more like a promise carved from diamond. They had found it. Sanctuary. Safety. Paradise. But paradise is a delicate veneer, and beneath it, the rot began to seep through. It started with the senses, subtle betrayals the mind tried to rationalize. The air, though clean, carried a faint, sweet chemical scent, like ozone after a storm mixed with something vaguely antiseptic. A child's balloon, left overnight on a porch, would be found deflated, its rubber brittle and crumbling. The community-provided milk, though cold and fresh, left a faint, metallic tang on the tongue, a taste that water couldn't wash away. The officials, always present with polished shoes and emptier smiles, dismissed it. New plumbing, they'd say. High mineral content. An overactive imagination. Then, the sickness came. Not a plague, but a quiet, selective culling. A family would sit down to dinner, and by midnight, they would be found on the floor, their skin clammy and pale, their bodies racked with a weakness that felt ancient. The ambulances arrived with an eerie, preternatural speed, their silent, electric engines gliding to a halt before the sirens had even faded in the distance. It was as if they had been waiting just around the corner. Inside the bright, white halls of the hospital, the medicine was a performance of calm horror. Nurses with placid, unchanging expressions would soothe with soft, rehearsed words. A minor reaction, they'd murmur. "We need to run some tests. Just a little something to help you sleep. You'll wake up good as new." But they never did. They woke up, less. Their bodies were a map of fresh, precise incisions closed with stitches too neat, too surgical. The explanations were smooth, logical, and utterly hollow. Routine appendectomy you never knew you needed. A gastric bypass, purely preventative. The pain was a deep, bone-deep ache, and the exhaustion was a weight they could not shake. Worst of all were their eyes. The light behind them had been dimmed. Memories felt fuzzy, love felt distant, as if something core to their being had been neatly excised and taken away. A silent, terrified knowledge began to circulate through the town's perfect streets. Neighbors, once friendly, now exchanged only hurried, fearful glances. Conversations died the moment a white-coated official walked by. The cheerful music piped through the street lamps at dusk now sounded like a funeral dirge. At night, some swore they could hear it, a low, subaudible hum emanating from the hospital's foundation, a vibration felt in the teeth more than heard by the ears. Sometimes, it was punctuated by a muffled scream, quickly cut off, or the sound of a single, desperate sob from a vent that shouldn't have carried sound. When the first family, the Millers, tried to leave, the illusion shattered completely. The seamless, automated gates at the town's perimeter did not open. Pleasant, Recorded voices cited unscheduled maintenance and external atmospheric hazards. But behind the recorded message were men in security uniforms with polished boots and eyes that held no humanity. Their smiles were tight, their politeness a threat. "For your own safety," they said, their hands resting on the electric prods at their belts. The message was clear: checkout time was never. Paranoia became the new currency. The free, delivered rations were buried in backyards. People stopped answering their doors after dark. They drew their soundproof curtains and huddled in the dark, listening. Parents would watch their children sleep, a cold dread gripping them as they realized their child's laughter that day had sounded practiced. Husbands woke to find their wives standing at the window, staring out at the immutable glow of the hospital, whispering answers to questions no one had asked. They felt the town itself watching them. Not just through the discreet cameras on every corner, but in the way the streetlights seemed to follow them, in the way the ventilation systems seemed to pause to listen. The man who broke the conspiracy was named Elias. His wife, Lena, had been taken for severe food poisoning. The woman who returned was a ghost wearing Lena's skin. She was listless, her eyes vacant pools. She'd jump at the sound of their own refrigerator humming. 3 days later, she was dead. Sudden organ failure was the cold, printed diagnosis. Grief curdled into a festering, furious certainty. That night, armed with little more than rage and a stolen access card from a distracted orderly, Elias descended into the hospital's sublevels. The clean white halls gave way to grim, concrete passages humming with industrial power. He found a service elevator that plunged deep into the earth, far deeper than any foundation should have gone. The door opened onto hell. The air was cold and reeked of antiseptic and old blood. The room was a warehouse of horror, rows and rows of gleaming chrome cryo units, their misty glass revealing the vague, fleshy shapes of organs on ice. Digital boards listed names, blood types, and biological metrics next to flashing status lights, green for viable, red for harvested. And through a large observation window, he saw the source of the hum. An operating theater, blindingly lit, where surgeons, or things that looked like surgeons, moved with a chilling, mechanical precision. Their masked faces were bent over a body he recognized, Mr. Evans from down the street, who had moved for a new job. The scalpels glinted, and the thing that was not a surgeon lifted something glistening and vital from his open chest cavity, placing it into a sterile cooler. Elias's choked gasp echoed in the chamber. An alarm blared, a silent, pulsing red light. He ran. Boots thundered on metal grates behind him. He was a rat in a maze of his own nightmare, scrambling through steam-filled utility tunnels, tearing his hands on barbed wire as he squeezed through a forgotten maintenance exit, finally collapsing onto the cold, real earth outside the city limits. He was found by a highway patrolman, bleeding, babbling, and half-mad. He told his story between ragged breaths, his eyes wild with a truth too horrific to invent. The raid was swift and brutal. A convoy of state police cars, their sirens shattering the town's artificial peace, stormed the gates. But they found nothing. Nothing but clean, empty hallways. The elevators to the sublevels now led to bare concrete pits. The operating theaters were spotless, empty rooms smelling of bleach. Every record, every computer, every scrap of evidence had been scrubbed from existence. The town stood silent and pristine, a perfect, empty shell, mocking them with its silence. The survivors were relocated, their bodies a patchwork of scars, their minds forever fractured. They are plagued by phantom pains where organs used to be. They jump at the sound of humming appliances. Some swear on quiet nights they can still hear it, the faint, electric whisper of a scalpel, and a voice, gentle and cold, murmuring from the very walls of their new homes. Don't worry. Just sleep. The city of tomorrow was never a city. It was a farm. A harvesting ground built with beautiful, efficient cruelty. And as you read this, somewhere under a different sky, blueprints are being drawn for another perfect town. The foundations are being poured. The posters are being printed. And it waits, with gleaming, hungry jaws, for the next dreamers to willingly walk inside.